June Harwell stood in the farm supply parking lot, staring at the 750-pound bags of feed in the bed of her rusted pickup. Her hip sent sharp signals of protest up her spine, the same hip that had been begging for surgery she couldn't afford since the fall 3 years ago. The late afternoon sun beat down on the asphalt, turning the air thick and heavy with summer heat. She'd managed to get the bags into her cart inside the store, barely, and the teenage clerk had loaded them into the truck with the forklift. But now she faced the reality waiting at home. Unloading them alone, dragging each one into the barn, her hips screaming with every step. The thought of it made her want to sit down right there on the hot pavement and cry, but June Harwell hadn't cried in public since Albert's funeral 2 years ago, and she wasn't about to start now. The rumble of engines cut through the parking lot's stillness. June looked up to see 3 motorcycles rolling toward the feed store, their chrome catching the sunlight like mirrors. Her first instinct was to get in the truck and leave, but the bikes pulled into spaces near her, and the riders were already dismounting. Big men, leather vests, beards that spoke of miles and weather, and stories she'd never hear. The tallest one glanced her way, then at the loaded truck bed, then back at her. June gripped her keys tighter, torn between fear and the exhausting knowledge that she had 7 bags to move and a body that could barely manage one. "Ma'am, you planning to unload those yourself?" The tall one's voice was gentler than she expected. June straightened her spine, a habit from 71 years of not complaining, not asking for help, not being a burden. "I'll manage." The rider walked closer, and she could see his face now, weathered, maybe, 50-something, with eyes that reminded her of her father's working border collies. All business and intelligence. "Name's Flint. That's Ractor and Tundra. We're heading in for supplies, but we've got 5 minutes. Where you taking these?" "Home," June said, then felt foolish. "I mean, I can handle it there. Just need to get them in the truck properly." They shifted during loading. It was a lie, and from Flint's expression he knew it, but he just nodded to the other 2, and before June could protest, they were repositioning the feed bags in her truck bed, discussing weight distribution like it mattered, treating her old Ford like it deserved respect. "Thank you," June said when they finished. She meant to leave it at that, but something about the way they didn't make her feel small made her add, "It's a 20-minute drive. My barn. My hip's not what it used to be." "Where's your farm?" Flint asked. June told him. Old Harwell Road, named for Albert's grandfather who'd broken the land in 1924. The words came out with more pride than she'd felt in months. Flint exchanged glances with the others, some silent communication she couldn't read. "We'll follow you. Make sure those bags don't shift again." "Oh no, I couldn't," June started, but Flint was already walking back to his bike. "No trouble, ma'am. We're heading that direction anyway." June drove with 3 motorcycles behind her, feeling both protected and conspicuous. She wondered what the neighbors would think, then remembered she didn't have close neighbors anymore. The Kendricks had sold out 5 years ago, and the Morrison place stood empty after old Tom died. Just her and 200 acres of responsibility she could barely maintain. When they reached the farm, June's chest tightened at the sight of Lowell's sedan parked by the house. He wasn't supposed to come until Thursday. The bikers noticed her hesitation. Flint pulled up beside her driver's window. "Problem?" "No, just my late husband's business partner. He helps with the paperwork." June tried to sound casual, but her hands were shaking on the wheel. "Want us to come back another time?" June looked at the feed bags, thought about explaining to Lowell why she wasn't unloaded yet, imagined his tight-lipped disapproval. "No, please. The barn's just there." She led them to the weathered structure that needed paint and new boards, and a dozen other repairs she couldn't afford. The bikers unloaded with efficient speed, stacking the bags inside the barn door where she indicated. Their movements were practiced, careful, and she found herself thinking they knew their way around physical labor. Lowell emerged from the house as they finished. He stood on the porch, arms crossed, his silver hair perfect despite the heat. "June, what's going on here?" "They helped me unload, Lowell. My hip. I've told you to call me before you go to the store. I would have arranged delivery." Lowell's voice carried that edge of patient exasperation he'd perfected over the past 2 years, like she was a child who kept forgetting simple instructions. Flint straightened from setting down the last bag. "No trouble helping out. Lowell's gaze swept over the three bikers with obvious distaste. I'm sure June appreciates it. She can be impulsive, not thinking through the practicalities. He turned to June. We need to discuss those papers I mentioned on the phone. The equipment sale contract. June felt her stomach drop. Another sale. Another piece of Albert's legacy signed away. I thought we weren't doing that until next month. The buyer's moving faster than expected. It's good news, better price. But we need to finalize today. Lowell descended the porch steps, his approach casual but somehow hurting June toward the house, away from the strangers. Thank you so much for your help, June said to Flint and the others, hearing the dismissal in her own voice that Lowell's presence demanded. Flint nodded slowly. You need anything else, ma'am? She's fine, Lowell answered before June could. I take care of everything here. Have for 2 years now since Albert passed. June watched the bikers exchange another of those wordless communications. Flint reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a card, plain white with just a phone number. In case you need anything, heavy lifting, whatever. That won't be necessary, Lowell said, but June took the card anyway, clutching it like a lifeline she didn't yet understand she needed. The motorcycles departed with a rumble that echoed across the empty fields. June stood holding the card, Lowell's hand already on her elbow, guiding her toward the house and the papers that would take another piece of what Albert had built. Inside, Lowell spread documents across the kitchen table where June had eaten breakfast with Albert every morning for 43 years. This is straightforward. The combine and the grain drill. Chester Vance is offering $32,000, well above market value for equipment that age. June looked at the papers, the words swimming. She'd never been good with contracts, with legal language. Albert had always handled it. Then Albert died, and Lowell said he'd help, said it was what partners did, said she couldn't possibly manage alone. I thought the equipment was worth more. Not in current condition. And you're not using it anyway. You lease out the fields now. Lowell's pen appeared in his hand like magic. Sign here, here, and here. Can I read it first? Lowell's smile tightened imperceptibly. Of course. Though we went through all this on the phone Tuesday, remember? You said it sounded fine. Had she said that? June couldn't remember. The days blurred together lately. She picked up the first page, tried to focus on the dense paragraphs. Her head had started aching the moment Lowell arrived, the way it always did now. June, the buyer's waiting. If we miss this window, the price drops significantly. Lowell checked his watch. I have another appointment at 6. June signed. The pen moved across the pages in the places Lowell indicated, and each signature felt like a small betrayal of something she couldn't quite name. Good. Now, about the checkbook. Lowell gathered the papers with practiced efficiency. I've been reviewing the accounts. You wrote 3 checks last month without noting what they were for. Feed, vet bills, the property tax. I need you to log everything. We discussed this. Lowell's patience was wearing. She could hear it. This is why it's easier if I handle the accounts directly. You're not detail-oriented, June. Albert used to say that all the time. Albert had said it, affectionately. Lowell made it sound like a failing. I can manage the checkbook, June said, but her voice carried no conviction. Can you? Because last month you overdrafted twice. The bank called me. Lowell opened his briefcase. I've prepared new signature cards. We'll make the accounts joint. I can catch mistakes before they become problems. Protect you from your own oversights. June looked at the papers he was sliding forward, thought about those overdrafts she didn't remember making, about the fog that seemed to fill her brain whenever numbers were involved. I should talk to my kids first. Laura or Mitchell. You said yourself they're too busy to be bothered with this. Lowell's voice softened. June, I know it's hard accepting help, but Albert made me promise I'd look after you. This is looking after you. Had Albert made him promise that? June tried to remember, but the memory wouldn't come clear. She thought about calling Laura, hearing the distracted stress in her daughter's voice, the 3 grandchildren always screaming in the background. Mitchell was worse. His wife barely tolerated June's calls. They told me not to complain about how hard things are, June heard herself say. Laura said I needed to be more independent, not dump my problems on them. They're right to encourage independence, Lowell agreed smoothly. That's what this is. Letting me handle the financial complexities so you can focus on keeping the house, managing day to day. "You're doing wonderfully, June, but you need support in your weak areas." June signed the bank cards. Lowell left 20 minutes later with papers, checkbook, and another piece of her autonomy. She stood in the kitchen as his car disappeared down the drive, still holding the white card with just a phone number that 3 strangers had given her for no reason she understood. The barn needed mucking. The garden needed weeding. A fence post by the north pasture had rotted through last winter. June looked at the list of tasks that never ended, at the sunset coloring the sky over land her husband's grandfather had cleared with a mule and a plow, and felt the weight of it all pressing down like those feed bags she couldn't lift alone. She put the card in her pocket and went to feed the chickens. The work didn't stop just because you were tired. 3 days passed. June moved through her routines with the mechanical precision of someone who'd been doing the same tasks for decades. Up at 5, coffee, chickens, barn, garden, house. The rhythm of it kept her upright when her hip and her heart both wanted to quit. Thursday afternoon, Lowell returned with more papers. "The Vance sale went through. I've deposited the check, minus my commission, of course, but I need you to sign this addendum. Technical detail the lawyers caught." June signed. She'd learned that resisting just meant Lowell stayed longer, his disappointment filling the kitchen like smoke. "One more thing. I've been approached about the eastern 40 acres. Good offer for farmland that's just sitting fallow. Albert planted soybeans there." June's voice came out sharper than intended. "Albert's been gone 2 years. Lowell's tone was gentle, which somehow made it worse. "That land is doing nothing but costing you property tax. Sell it, and you'll have breathing room. Maybe even fix that hip of yours." June looked at him, really looked, and saw something she'd been too tired and confused to see before. Lowell wanted the land gone. All of it, piece by piece. "Why are you doing this?" "Doing what? Helping you?" Lowell's hurt expression was perfect. "June, I don't have to do any of this. I'm honoring Albert's memory, fulfilling a promise to my late partner. If you'd rather struggle alone." "No." June heard the defeat in her voice. "I'm sorry. I'm just tired." "Of course you are. This is too much for you." Lowell patted her hand. "Think about the 40 acres. I'll come back next week for your decision." After he left, June sat at the kitchen table until the shadows grew long. She pulled out the white card and stared at the number, wondering what she'd even say. That she felt like she was drowning? That she couldn't remember if she'd overdrafted the account or if Lowell was lying? That her own children told her not to bother them with complaints? She put the card back in her pocket and made dinner she barely ate. Saturday morning, June was in the barn when she heard vehicles approaching. Multiple vehicles. She emerged to find 3 motorcycles and 2 pickup trucks coming up the drive, and her first thought was panic. What would Lowell say if he drove by and saw this? Her second thought, arriving hard on the first, was anger at herself for caring what Lowell would say. Flint dismounted, followed by Raptor, Tundra, and 3 others she didn't recognize. 2 women were in the trucks, and the beds were loaded with supplies. "Morning, ma'am," Flint said. "We had surplus feed and materials. Thought you might could use them." "I can't pay." June started. "Not asking you to." A woman in her 40s, solid and capable looking, stepped forward. "I'm Shadow. We noticed your fence posts when we were here Thursday. If you don't mind, we've got replacements and some hands who know which end of a post hole digger to use." June's throat tightened. "Why?" Flint removed his sunglasses and she saw those working dog eyes again, smart and assessing. "Because you helped us when you didn't have to. Fed in your truck wasn't our business, but you let us make it our business. That means something. I didn't do anything. You overcame fear to accept help. That's not nothing." Flint's voice was matter-of-fact. "Now we're helping back. It's how this works." The next 4 hours dissolved June's resistance like spring rain on frost. The fence posts went up straight and solid. The barn got the board replacements she'd been putting off. Shadow asked careful questions about the farm, about Albert, about how June was managing, and June found herself answering with a honesty she hadn't given anyone in 2 years. "My business partner handles most of it now," June said, helping carry tools. "Lowell. He was Albert's friend, the man from Thursday." Shadow's tone was neutral, but something in it made June look up. "He's been very helpful. I'm not good with paperwork with numbers. He manages the accounts, the sales. June heard herself defending Lowell and wasn't sure why she felt the need. Sales? Shadow asked. You selling things? Equipment I'm not using. Some land, maybe. June looked out at the fields that rolled to the horizon. It's too much for me alone. Lowell says I should consolidate, make it manageable. Shadow exchanged a glance with Flint, who'd approached with a water jug. You trust this Lowell? Flint asked. The question hit June like a slap, because she realized she hadn't for a while. He's handling everything. Albert wanted him to look after me. Did Albert say that? Or did Lowell? Shadow's voice stayed gentle. June opened her mouth to answer, and found she couldn't. She didn't know. Couldn't remember. The uncertainty made her dizzy. Flint caught her elbow as she swayed. Let's get you to the shade. They sat her on the porch with cold water, and June felt tears threaten for the first time since she could remember. I'm sorry. I'm just confused lately. I sign things and don't remember. I can't keep track. My children don't call anymore. They're tired of me complaining. When's the last time you actually spoke to your kids? Shadow asked. June tried to think. 6 months, maybe more? They're busy. Lowell said they told him I was calling too much, upsetting them with my problems. Lowell talks to your children? Flint's question was sharp. He has their numbers. For emergencies. But June heard how weak it sounded. Shadow pulled out her phone. What's your daughter's name? Son's name? Laura Kenworth. And Mitchell Harwell. But I shouldn't bother them. Give me the numbers, Shadow said. And something in her voice made June obey. Shadow walked away to make calls. June sat with her water, watching the others finish the fence work, and felt something shifting in her understanding. Flint sat beside her, not speaking, just present in a way that didn't demand anything. Shadow returned 20 minutes later, her expression tight. June, your daughter has been trying to reach you for 4 months. She's called your number 17 times in the past, 3 weeks alone. She's been getting a message that your voicemail is full and hasn't been able to leave messages. The world tilted. That's impossible. My phone works fine. She gave me another number she's been calling, your landline. Shadow showed June her phone screen, a different number than June's actual landline. Does this look familiar? June stared at the number. That's Lowell's office line, he said. He said we should forward my calls there so he could screen them. Keep away solicitors. He's been intercepting your calls. Flint's voice was flat. What else is he handling for you? Everything, June whispered. Bank accounts, sales, legal papers. I sign things, but I can't keep track. Shadow crouched in front of June's chair. I work as a paralegal. Would you let me look at the papers you've signed? Whatever you have copies of. June led them inside, pulled out the folder Lowell had given her. For your records. Shadow spread the documents on the kitchen table, and her expression darkened with each page. This equipment sale, you signed it 6 days ago? Shadow held up the contract June barely remembered. Thursday. Lowell said it was good money. This is a land transfer. You sold 25 acres of timber rights. Shadow's finger traced the fine print. The buyer is a holding company. LDH Enterprises. I didn't sell land, just equipment. Look at the second page. Full timber rights for 25 years, removing all wood products. For $8,000. That's robbery for 25 acres of mature timber. Shadow pulled out another document. And this? You signed joint custody of your bank accounts. As of last Thursday, Lowell Drummond has full access to everything. June felt her hands go numb. He said it was to help catch my mistakes. What mistakes? Flint asked. Overdrafts. He said I overdrafted twice last month. Shadow was already on her phone. What bank? June told her. Shadow made another call, identified herself, asked pointed questions. When she hung up, her face was grim. No overdrafts in the past 9 months. Your account's been in good standing, but there have been 7 withdrawals in the past 8 weeks, each just under $10,000. Signed by Lowell Drummond as joint account holder. The kitchen spun. June gripped the table edge. How much? $63,000. Gone. June couldn't breathe. $63,000. The equipment sales. The timber rights she didn't know she'd sold. All of it disappeared into Lowell's pockets while he told her she was confused, incompetent, a burden to her children. "I need to call Laura," June said. "Right now." Shadow dialed, handed over the phone. Laura answered on the second ring, and the relief in her daughter's voice made June's tears finally break free. "Mom? Mom, is that you? I've been so worried. Why haven't you called back? I've left messages with Lowell, but he said you were doing fine. Didn't want to be bothered." "He lied," June said. "Sweetheart, he lied about everything." The conversation lasted an hour. Mitchell called in on three-way. Both children were horrified, furious, devastated that they'd believed Lowell's assurances that June was fine but wanted space. Laura was booking flights. Mitchell was calling lawyers he knew. Both kept apologizing for not trying harder to reach her. When June hung up, she found the bikers had remained, quiet presences giving her space but not leaving her alone. Shadow had organized the documents into evidence piles. Flint was on his own phone, his conversation clipped and serious. "County sheriff's a friend," Flint said when he finished. "He's coming tomorrow morning, wants to see all of this. Shadow's also contacted a lawyer who handles elder abuse cases. She'll be here tomorrow too. I can't afford. She works pro bono for cases like this. She'll want a percentage of what you recover, but only after you recover it." Shadow's smile was fierce. "And you're going to recover it, June. All of it. Lowell's about to learn what happens when you steal from someone who has the right friends." June looked at these strangers who'd become something more. Witnesses, advocates, the support system Lowell had carefully stripped away. "Why are you doing this?" "Because it's right," Flint said simply. "And because nobody should face this alone." That night, June slept better than she had in 2 years, knowing her children were coming home, knowing help was real and not a trap. The white card with just a phone number sat on her nightstand, and she understood now it wasn't just a number. It was a promise. Sunday morning arrived with a caravan. The sheriff, a man named Tom Bridger, who'd apparently served with Flint in the army decades ago, pulled up first. Then Laura and her husband, having driven through the night from Ohio. Then the lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Chen, who took one look at Shadow's organized evidence and smiled like a predator. Mitchell arrived by noon with his wife, who June had always thought didn't like her but who hugged her now with genuine tears. The bikers returned with more members, silent observers who filled the house with a protective presence that said clearly, "This woman is not alone anymore." Lowell arrived at 2, his usual Thursday visit, and stopped dead when he saw the packed driveway. He recovered quickly, that professional smile sliding into place as he approached the porch where they waited. "June, what's all this? I thought we'd meet privately." "Come inside, Lowell." Sheriff Bridger's voice carried weight. "We need to discuss some documents." Lowell's smile faltered. "I don't understand." "Inside. Now." The confrontation was brutal and efficient. Patricia Chen laid out the evidence piece by piece. Forged signatures, fraudulent land transfers, embezzled funds, elder abuse, financial exploitation. Lowell blustered, claimed misunderstandings, insisted everything was legal and June had agreed to all of it. Then Patricia played the recording Shadow had made of June's testimony the night before, her voice shaking as she described signing papers she didn't understand, being told she was incompetent, being isolated from her children through lies. "You told my daughter I didn't want to hear from her," June said, her voice steady now in a way it hadn't been in months. "You told me she said I complained too much." Lowell's face had gone pale. "You were confused. I was protecting you from stress. You were stealing from her." Sheriff Bridger stood. "Lowell Drummond, you're under arrest for fraud, forgery, and financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. We'll add more charges as the investigation proceeds." The handcuffs clicked shut, and June watched the man who'd systematically stolen her life get walked to a patrol car. Laura stood beside her, arm around her shoulders. Mitchell was already on the phone with the bank, starting the process of freezing accounts and recovering funds. "Mom, I'm so sorry," Laura whispered. "We should have known. Should have tried harder." "He was very good at lying," June said, "and I was very good at believing I was the problem." The legal proceedings took months, but June wasn't alone through any of it. The bikers became regular fixtures at the farm, helping with heavy work, driving June to meetings with lawyers and prosecutors, standing silent and intimidating in courtrooms when Lowell's attorney tried to paint June as a confused old woman. Patricia Chen proved Lowell had embezzled over $90,000 in cash and assets. The land transfers were voided, the equipment sales were reversed where possible, compensated where not. Lowell's other holdings were seized to cover restitution. He would serve 5 years for elder abuse and fraud. But the money and land weren't the real restoration. Laura moved back to help June manage the farm properly, bringing the grandchildren to spend summers learning the land their great-great-grandfather had cleared. Mitchell visited monthly, had genuine conversations, stopped treating his mother like an obligation. The bikers, the brotherhood, as June learned to call them, became family in a way she'd never expected. When harvest time came, 50 motorcycles rolled up the drive, and their riders spent a weekend bringing in hay, repairing equipment, shoring up the old barn for another generation. June stood at the edge of the north field, watching this improbable crew work her land, and felt something she'd lost long before Lowell started stealing from her. She felt like she belonged to something bigger than herself, something that valued her not despite her vulnerability, but because she'd chosen kindness despite fear. Flint approached with a grin, his face streaked with honest dirt. "We're putting up a new sign by the road. Thought you should approve it first." He showed her the design on his phone. Harwell Farm established 1924 in proud letters, with smaller text below. "Friends always welcome." June touched the screen like she could feel the wood grain through glass. "It's perfect." "You're still planning that harvest dinner you mentioned?" Flint asked. "Next month. Everyone's invited. Everyone who helped." June looked at him seriously. "I don't know how to thank you. Any of you. You saved more than my farm. You saved yourself," Flint said. "You let us help, but you made the hard choices. You stood up in that courtroom and told the truth even though it was scary. You did that, June, because you made sure I wasn't alone when I did it." The harvest dinner became an annual tradition. June's long table, extended with sawhorses and plywood, stretched across a front yard and seated 60 people. Family, bikers, lawyers who'd become friends, neighbors who'd learned the truth and felt ashamed they hadn't seen the signs. Sheriff Bridger said grace, thanking the Lord for justice and second chances. Laura served pie she'd made from apples in June's orchard. The grandchildren ran wild with biker kids who'd arrived on the backs of their parents' motorcycles. The sun set gold over 200 acres of land that would stay in the family now, protected by paperwork that Patricia had made bulletproof. June sat at the head of her own table, in her own home, on her own land, surrounded by people who'd taught her that asking for help wasn't weakness, it was wisdom. That being vulnerable didn't make you a victim, it made you human. That family wasn't just blood, it was the people who showed up when you needed them and stayed until you didn't. She caught Flint's eye across the crowd. He raised his glass in silent salute. She raised hers back, thinking about a parking lot and 7 bags of feed, and a decision to accept help from strangers who turned out to be exactly the friends she needed. The land had been in her family for a century. Now it would last another, not because she'd done it alone, but because she'd finally learned she didn't have to. Sometimes salvation came on motorcycles, wearing leather and loyalty, reminding broken people that they were worth fighting for. Sometimes all it took was asking for help with a bag of feed and trusting that the help offered came, with no strings, just the simple human decency of seeing someone struggling and deciding to care. June Harwell had learned to stop apologizing for needing help. She'd learned her children loved her, that being old didn't mean being helpless, and that the rumble of motorcycle engines could sound like coming home. Most importantly, she'd learned that when someone tells you not to complain, to stop bothering people, to accept your diminished place, that's when you should complain louder, bother more people, and refuse to be diminished. She'd been told not to complain, but she'd found people who wanted to hear her voice, who made space for her truth, who turned her whisper into a roar that brought a predator down and lifted a broken woman back to her rightful place. The farm would endure. So would June. And when she drove past that new sign, "Friends always welcome," she meant every word. If you have enjoyed the story, tell YouTube to send you more stories like this by subscribing to this channel, liking the video, and leaving a comment.